Three warrior cultures, separated by thousands of miles and hundreds of years, never exchanged letters. They had no shared language, no common trade route, no knowledge of one another's training systems. And yet each of them independently arrived at the same answer to a problem modern medicine still hasn't solved: how to keep the human spine functional, upright, and pain-free for an entire lifetime. Modern men over 40 are failing at this, not because they stopped caring, because they were handed half a system and told it was complete. You have probably tried something: stretching, a foam roller, a standing desk, maybe a chiropractor who gives you 30 minutes of relief and sends you back into the same chair that created the problem. The mainstream answer to spinal decline is management. Treat the symptom, book the appointment. Accept that some degree of rounding, stiffness, and pain is simply what getting older feels like. Here is what three warrior cultures say about that premise, and why every one of them would have considered it a form of surrender. The modern collapse. Before we go back in time, name what's actually happening in the body. The spine is not a static structure. It is a dynamic, load-bearing system held in position by a network of deep, stabilizing muscles. The multifidus, the transversospinalis group, the deep cervical flexors, that exist for one purpose: to maintain alignment under load and across time. These muscles are not the ones you see in the mirror. They don't grow visibly. They don't respond to the movements that build a chest or a bicep. They respond to one thing only: deliberate, sustained positional demand. When that demand disappears, when the body spends most of its hours seated, collapsed forward, with the spine in passive flexion, these muscles don't just weaken, they forget their job. The technical term is neural inhibition. The plain language consequence is this: your body stops recruiting the muscles that hold you upright, even when you are standing. The posture problem you can see in the mirror is the result of a neural pattern problem you cannot. Modern fitness sold men a solution to the visible symptom: chest stretches, hip flexor releases, shoulder blade squeezes. These are not wrong, they are insufficient. They address the surface without touching the system underneath. Three warrior cultures understood the system underneath. None of them called it neural inhibition, but all three built daily practices that targeted it with precision. And the men who followed those practices were still moving correctly at 60, 70, and beyond. Culture 1. The samurai, feudal Japan, 12th to 19th century. Begin with what most people imagine when they picture a samurai: the sword, the armor, the battlefield. What most people don't picture is the hours before any of that, the stillness that preceded the movement, the practice that made the movement possible. In feudal Japan, a samurai's training day did not begin with combat. It began with zazen, seated meditation in strict postural alignment, and with suburi, the solo repetition of sword cuts performed in precise standing posture, sometimes for an hour before a training partner was involved. The samurai trained at institutions called dojo, which translates not as gym but as place of the way. The distinction matters. A gym is a place you go to produce an output. A dojo is a place you go to refine a practice. The posture was not the means to an end. It was the end itself. The specific spinal demand of samurai movement is what produced their longevity outcome. The primary stance of kenjutsu, the sword art, is hanmi, a half-body stance requiring the practitioner to hold the spine vertical while rotating at the thoracic, not the lumbar. This is not an incidental detail. Most modern humans rotate from the lumbar spine because the thoracic is stiff and the lumbar is relatively mobile. Samurai practice reversed that pattern through deliberate daily repetition. The thoracic spine was kept supple and active. The lumbar was protected through the muscular bracing created by the stance itself. The physical outcome is documented in historical accounts of aged samurai masters. Practitioners in their 60s and 70s were described not as men managing decline, but as men whose movement quality had improved over decades. The refinement of the pattern continued long after physical peak. That is not a motivational observation. It is a mechanical one. When the deep spinal stabilizers are consistently loaded through correct positional demand, they do not follow the same aging curve as the superficial muscles. They maintain function, because function is their only purpose. The mechanism the samurai unlocked: thoracic mobility under load, maintained through daily deliberate practice, protects the lumbar spine from the compensatory collapse that produces the rounded, forward-bent posture modern men recognize in themselves by their mid-40s. Modern translation: deliberate thoracic rotation under light load, practiced daily, not periodically. On the other side of the world, a culture that never heard of Hanmi arrived at the same spinal principle through an entirely different path. Culture 2, the Shaolin monks, Henan Province, China, 5th century onward. The Shaolin monastery sits at the base of Song Mountain in Henan Province. It was founded in 477 CE. For 1,500 years, the monks who trained there maintained a record of physical function that historians and martial arts scholars have documented in enough detail to draw clear mechanistic conclusions. The Shaolin system is often reduced in popular culture to acrobatic martial arts. What the popular version omits is the foundational layer, the standing Qigong practices and the Zhanzhuang posture training, translated as standing like a tree, that preceded everything else in a monk's daily practice. A student at Shaolin did not begin with a kick or a punch. He began with standing, sometimes for 20 minutes, sometimes for an hour, in precise postural alignment, with particular attention to what the tradition called holding the crown of the head to the sky, a cue that activated the deep cervical flexors, lengthened the posterior chain, and engaged the multifidus along the entire length of the spine. The mechanism here is distinct from the samurais, where the samurai loaded the spine through movement, dynamic rotational demand. The Shaolin monks loaded it through isometric hold, sustained positional demand at zero movement. This is not passive standing. Zhanzhuang, in correct form, is an active practice. The muscles required to hold a posture against gravity for extended duration are precisely the deep stabilizers that modern men have lost. The practice did not train these muscles by exhausting them. It trained them by requiring them to work continuously at low intensity for long periods, which is exactly how postural muscles function in a healthy spine. Historical records from the Shaolin tradition document monks who continued their standing practice well into their 70s and 80s. The posture maintained throughout their later decades was not the product of good genetics. It was the product of a system that had been training the correct muscles every single day for decades, in a way no other form of exercise replicates. The mechanism the Shaolin monks unlocked: isometric postural loading, holding alignment under gravity for sustained duration, trains the deep spinal stabilizers in the only way they actually respond, not through dynamic strength work, through sustained positional demand at low intensity over long time. Two civilizations, two completely different methods, the same deep muscular system, the same outcome. There is a third, and its proof is the most physically documented of all three. Culture 3, the Ottoman Pelwani wrestlers, Anatolia and Persia, 10th to 18th century. Pelwani wrestling is one of the oldest continuously practiced athletic traditions in the world. Its roots trace to the 10th century in Persia, and it reached its most systematized form in the Ottoman training halls called tekkes and Zurkhaneh, houses of strength, that were active across Anatolia and Central Asia from roughly the 12th century onward. The Zurkhaneh is the institution that matters here. It was not simply a wrestling hall. It was a disciplined training system with a structured daily practice that included bodyweight movement, club swinging with instruments called meals, and specific postural holds performed as part of a ritual sequence. The athletes who trained in the Zurkhaneh were known for a physical quality that historical accounts describe consistently: an upright, open-chested posture maintained even in advanced age, even in a sport that places severe compressive demand on the spine. The reason is mechanical and specific. The meal, a wooden club ranging from a few kilograms to over 30 kilograms, was swung overhead in a pattern that required the practitioner to maintain a rigid, vertical spine while moving heavy load behind the head. This is a different demand from both the samurai's rotational loading and the Shaolin monk's isometric hold. It is dynamic loading in the sagittal plane, with the weight moving posteriorly, which directly trains the thoracic extensors, the deep cervical stabilizers, and the posterior chain in a manner that nothing in modern gym programming replicates. The Pelwani athletes were not maintaining good posture despite their training. They were maintaining good posture because of their training. And the specific outcome, documented in paintings, written accounts, and the living tradition of Zurkhaneh practice that continues today in Iran, is a practitioner class that remained upright, capable, and physically impressive well past the age at which modern men expect joint pain and postural decline to set in. The mechanism the Zurkhaneh athletes unlocked, posterior chain loading through overhead and behind the head movement, trains the spinal extensors and deep cervical stabilizers in a plane of motion that neither rotational nor isometric training reaches. The three mechanisms together form a complete system. 3 civilizations, 3 distinct mechanisms, 1 spine. Here is how to apply all 3. Principle 1. From the samurai. Daily thoracic rotation under light load. The samurai did not stretch their thoracic spine. They rotated it deliberately, under the load of a held position, every single day. The modern equivalent is not a foam roller exercise. It is a practice. Sit in a firm chair or kneel in a tall kneeling position. Hold a light weight, 2 to 5 kilograms, at your chest with both hands. Rotate from the thoracic spine only, not the hips, not the lumbar, the mid-back. 8 to 10 slow rotations each direction, with a 2-second pause at the end range. This is not a warm-up, it is the practice. 3 to 4 sets every morning. The rotation under load, even light load, recruits the deep thoracic rotators in a way passive stretching does not. What you are training, the thoracic mobility that protects the lumbar from compensatory collapse. What you will notice within 4 weeks. The rounding at your mid-back during sitting begins to correct without effort. The pattern is being rebuilt at the neural level. Principle 2. From the Shaolin monks. Sustained isometric postural hold. This will feel too simple to work. That is the precise reason most men don't do it long enough to find out that it does. Stand with your feet hip-width apart. Stack your spine vertically. Draw the crown of your head upward, not the chin, the crown. Feel the posterior chain engage from the base of your skull to your heels. Hold this position for 5 minutes, not in a strained way, in an active way. Every 10 seconds, perform a micro check. Is the crown still rising? Is the lower back neither overarched nor collapsed? Are the shoulder blades sitting flat against the rib cage? 5 minutes once daily is the minimum effective dose. 10 minutes is where the adaptation begins to accelerate. This is not passive standing. If it feels passive, you are not doing it correctly. The deep stabilizers are working. You simply cannot feel them working the way you can feel a bicep curl. That invisibility is the whole point. These muscles were never meant to be felt. They were meant to function. Principle 3. From the Zurkhaneh. Posterior chain loading in the sagittal plane. The meal is not widely available. Its modern equivalent is: use a light kettlebell, 8 to 12 kilograms for most men beginning this practice. Stand upright. Hold the kettlebell with both hands. Raise it overhead and lower it slowly behind your head. A movement called a pullover or a behind-the-neck lowering, while maintaining a rigid, vertical spine. This is not a heavy strength exercise. It is a controlled postural loading drill. 3 to 5 kilograms less than you think you need. 4 sets of 8 repetitions, moving slowly, with full spinal extension maintained throughout. What you are training: the thoracic extensors, the deep cervical stabilizers, and the posterior chain in the one plane of motion the first 2 principles do not fully reach. What you will notice: a new awareness of the muscles along your upper back and the back of your neck. Not soreness, but presence. They are waking up. The complete practice takes between 15 and 25 minutes daily. It is not a workout. It is a maintenance system. The same category of practice that samurai masters, Shaolin monks, and Zurkhaneh wrestlers engaged in every morning before the day demanded anything of their bodies. 3 civilizations with no contact, 3 mechanisms, 3 independent confirmations of the same anatomical truth. The spine does not maintain itself. It requires deliberate, daily, targeted demand, not aggressive treatment, not periodic stretching, not a 1-hour session with a practitioner who adjusts what you then immediately collapse back into. The chiropractor is the symptom manager. The daily practice is the system. Samurai masters didn't see a practitioner for their spines because their spines did not produce the problem. The practitioner exists to treat. Not because their lives were easy, because their daily practice was precise. Intensity built the warriors. Precision kept them. That precision is available to you right now. 15 minutes in the morning, 3 principles, 1 spine. The system was never lost. It was simply not the thing being sold.